The last time I preached on this passage from the Gospel of Luke was 6 years ago to the day, September 25th, and it was my very first time preaching in an elementary school. We just unloaded a trailer, and we built a church, sort of, in the cafetorium of Mooneyham Elementary School, and only a few minutes late, we were close, we had begun our very first worship service at our second campus, which we called St. Andrew's Westridge. And those of you, all of you who were here 6 years ago, will remember Westridge. Many of you helped make it happen. And I'm still proud of Westridge, even if it didn't last. God used it in remarkable and unexpected ways to build up leaders who, in turn, have been vital to helping St. Andrews navigate a rector transition, a building project, and a worldwide pandemic. Also, just to be clear, we were right that God was calling St. Andrews to be a two-campus church. We got the location wrong, and we jumped the gun a little bit. But our second campus is across the street, where right now our brothers and sisters at the congregation at Hidden Springs are worshiping this morning. But this same month, in fact, I think it's the same week, also saw the start of something else 6 years ago. Something that not only lasted, but has flourished, something that impacts hundreds of people each and every day in our community. Because 6 years ago, one of the members of our congregation, Kim Sanchez, set up an old wardrobe in front of Hugs Cafe, and she filled it with canned and shelf-stable food and called it the Little Free Pantry. And on it, she wrote, "Take what you need, leave what you can." Today, there are 11 pantries in our community under the McKinney Little Free Pantry umbrella, including the one that is in our parking lot down there under the Jeffrey Thomas Arthur Pavilion. You all regularly donate to the pantry, and I can assure you it is regularly used. Every day. All day long. And I'm glad that we have the anniversary of Kim's founding the Little Free Pantry to celebrate on this day when we read the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. The scripture tells us that Lazarus longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. So how do you think Lazarus would have felt about a whole pantry full of food? All right, what about our Wednesday afternoon food distribution we had last week? What about the overflowing shelf of snacks that's down the hall that is destined for the Samaritan Inn? Lazarus would have done better in our neighborhood. As he should. We would be pretty followers of Jesus if we were full-on in rich man territory. The rich man in this story, he sets a low bar. Yes, we clear it. Good. But it's a pretty low bar. And the point of the story is not just to do better than the rich man. The story is calling us to cross the line that separates us from suffering in the world. And that's a little harder. A little harder message to hear, but it's worth looking at again. The setup to this parable, which is on page 4 in your bulletin here if you want to follow along, the setup is pretty simple. The rich man was rich. He wore purple robes, which were the very fanciest kinds of robes, and he feasted sumptuously every day. Every day, by golly. Every single one he feasted sumptuously. Lazarus, the poor man, every day he spent outside the gates of the rich man's house, hungry and hurting. We know Lazarus was also covered in sores. Such illnesses were often considered in the ancient world a sign of sinful choices in one's life. And it's easy for us to be like silly ancient people. But we sort of do the same thing today, too, still. If you have monkeypox right now, we're like, I know how you get monkeypox. Right? Same thing. That's all they were doing. And the dogs were licking Lazarus in his sores. Now, we have the pet blessing coming up. I know some of you, you love sweet doggy kisses. There's no such thing as sweet doggy kisses in the Bible. Not a thing, okay? Dogs were unclean, both ritually and practically. So that is not a good thing. That's not Lazarus' one consolation. Lazarus was practically separated from the rich man by the gate, and he was spiritually separated, sort of conceptually, or so it seemed. Right? That's how they lived in this life. And then they died. Things are very different. The rich man is in Hades. He's tormented by fire. Let's just be frank about it. He's in hell. Lazarus is in the bosom of Abraham, it says. That's a weird phrase. I bet you're not looking forward to heaven so you can snuggle in Abraham's armpit. But what it means is that he's been gathered to the people of God. Remember, Father Abraham was sort of the father, metaphorically, of God's people. So Lazarus has been gathered into the people of God in heaven. And when Abraham explains this reversal to the rich man, there's actually precious little moral judgment. It's not like, well, rich man, you were bad and Lazarus was good, so now you're down there and he's up here. That's not what he says. He just says, you had good things in life and Lazarus had bad things, and here in the afterlife, everything is reversed. His child, remember, during your lifetime, you received your good things, and Lazarus, in like manner, evil things, but now he is comforted here and you are in agony. The rich man and Lazarus, then, are opposites. They're opposites in life, and then they are opposites in death. Everything is just reversed. And it's so perfect the way this works. So in death, the rich man was longing for just a drop of water. Just as in life, Lazarus had been longing for a scrap of food. In death, the rich man is covered in burns and licked by flames, just as in life, Lazarus had been covered with sores and licked by dogs. In death, Lazarus could not help the rich man because there was this great impassable chasm between them. Just as in life, the rich man couldn't help Lazarus because there was this great impassable... Oh wait, it's just a gate. Oh, snap. Do you see the problem here? A gate is not a chasm. Or at least it shouldn't be. But in his earthly life, the rich man used the gate as an impassable chasm between him and the needs of the world. It's not that being rich is hopeless, but that if we wall ourselves off from the needy world, we will eventually find we have walled ourselves off from the God who is out there in the needy world. Do you have any gates in your life? I don't mean like privacy fences or deadbolts. This is not a personal safety question. I mean, are there structures or habits in your life that are designed to keep the suffering of the world out? We're too good at building gates. It's too easy. It's too easy to avoid certain parts of town. Too easy to throw clothes at the Goodwill truck. It's too easy to discuss issues of race, but only with people who look like us. It's too easy to suddenly find an important email while you're at the red light so you don't have to make eye contact with a panhandler. It's too easy to find an excuse to go to the hospital or not go to the hospital. It's too easy to send a card but skip the funeral. Too easy to click the Facebook sad face, with one with the tears, instead of picking up the phone to encourage a friend who's suffering. We all have gates. But what if Jesus is on the other side of them? Christ promises that we will meet and serve him in the least of these. But if the least of these are always on the other side of our gates, then Christ will always be locked out of our life. The crucial difference between the gates that we have here on earth and the impassable chasms of the afterlife is that we can pass through our gates. The chasm which Abraham described as impassable is impassable in both directions. Lazarus can no more go down than the rich man can go up. But the rich man's gate was only impassable for Lazarus. It was not impassable for the rich man. And similarly, we can use our gates to keep others out, but that does not mean that we cannot pass over them. We can step down into others' suffering and pain, just as Christ the Lord stepped down from heaven into our world of suffering and pain. Right? What is the incarnation except the God of heaven going through his gate down into the world of suffering and pain? The parable reminds us that we must be willing to share the evil things of the world. Near the end of his play, Shakespeare's King Lear says to himself, "Expose thyself to feel what wretches feel." Which is exactly right. The Son of God stepped through the gate of heaven to come be one of us. And in like manner, we must go through the gates of our lives to feel what others feel. You know, the rich man knew about Lazarus. Turns out he knew his name. He knew about Lazarus, as surely as you and I know about those who suffer in the world, but he didn't know Lazarus. Because if he knew Lazarus, he could have identified with Lazarus, shared the evil things of the world with Lazarus. If that rich man truly knew Lazarus, then Abraham could not have said of the rich man that he did not receive any evil things. So 6 years ago, when Kim Sanchez first installed that little free pantry, Channel 5 came and did a news story about it on the evening news. And during the segment, they interviewed an elderly African-American man who had come to get food from the pantry that day. And he and Kim met and they talked. And the closing clip of the news segment, the kind of final image of the news segment, shows Kim and this man parting with a hug. And then there are tears in Kim's eyes as she says, "It's so nice to meet you." And I didn't understand what the tears were about when I saw the news clip. Because, believe it or not, they didn't show everything on the news. The news crew that was there, they didn't actually expect that anyone would come and use the pantry, get food out of the pantry while they were there. But while they were inside, inside Hugs Cafe, working on the story, this elderly African-American man named Larry Wilson came up. And Larry was originally from New Orleans. He moved here, it's like 15 years ago now or something, right? He moved here in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. And that day, he was wearing a baseball cap that said NOLA, N-O-L-A, New Orleans, Louisiana, across the front of the baseball cap. And then he came up and began getting food out of the pantry. And one of the news team who was inside saw him, got up, stepped outside, and said, "Hey, NOLA!" And Larry, remember he's black, Larry immediately dropped the food, threw his hands up in the air, and said, What? I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong, I promise. As Abraham would say, that man has experienced some evil things in his life. And that's why there were tears in Kim's eyes. Because she knew the depths of Larry's suffering and had been there to share just a little bit as witness and as comforter. The rich man and Lazarus never shared such an embrace or such tears. The rich man never knew how nice it would have been to meet Lazarus. And this is why our hands and feet ministry is so important, friends. This is why we go to the apartment complex with snack bags when the kids come home from school. This is why we go serve meals at Shiloh Place. This is why we plan to have a party this year with the families to deliver the angel tree gifts. This is why Logan and I went to Berks and not only blessed the classrooms and the gyms, but we blessed the teachers who were there and asked for a blessing. This is why our Belize team is actually going to Belize. This is why we eat and work and worship and play with our brothers and sisters in Christ the King parish there. We go. We add event after event to the hands and feet section of your announcements thing. We go because our gates are spring-loaded. And if we keep pushing them open, if we don't keep pushing them open, they will spring shut. So we do keep pushing them open. We don't go to the world the way Christ went to the world. then we may not realize that's where he is until it is too late. So let's keep opening our gates, stepping out into the world for which Christ died.